learning is something that I feel is part of my journey, and I hope that can help me keep up with the change, keep up with the new perspective, and actively, consciously try to be a better version of myself and to do better.
I was reading a statistic. The number of women that have actually joined the workforce in China, maybe that also probably was one of the major reasons for the velocity that it got to its own economy. Hello, my name is Siddharth Chatterjee, the United Nations Resident Coordinator in China, and welcome to Delivering as One, a UN in China conversation. In this podcast, we highlight the heads of UN agencies in China who shape our diversity, discover their motivations, and find out about their work here on the ground. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Ms. Smriti Aryal, Country Representative of UN Women in China. Ms. Aryal, a national of Nepal, joined the United Nations in China in 2019. Smriti, welcome to Delivering as One.
Thank you, Sid.
So let's jump straight in. Tell us about your early life, education, work, your growing up, your studies, early career.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to have this chat with you about my personal and professional aspirations and my career. As you've already introduced me, I grew up in Nepal. I am a Nepali citizen, and I have, a very simple middle-class background, like many people in this room or around the world. My parents were educated, so we were three daughters and really raised to believe that we could do anything we wanted in life. And I guess, this early value about self-belief and discipline is what it has taken me this far.
Fantastic. What prompted your early career towards the United Nations?
It's a very interesting conversation. So, I was a good student growing up. My father was an engineer. My mom was a professor. So I grew up really appreciating the value of education and that being very important for everything we're doing in our lives and for the trajectory about our life's outcome. And so I never thought about it. They said, you're a good student, become an engineer, follow your father's footsteps, being the eldest daughter. And I kind of did it. So I went to study engineering.
Wow.
In my third year in the US, when I was taking electives, and as you know, you have to take electives. And I said, what should I learn? Because I knew nothing about social sciences. Then I took a sociology class. And it really opened my eyes. I was like, oh my God, there is a whole world out there that is not science, that is not physics and mathematics or chemistry, because I was studying chemical engineering. So spending a lot of time in lab doing experiments. Then I thought, I'm going to just switch my major. And so when I started studying social science, international development, it really got me thinking and learning more about the United Nations and development systems, theories around it, programs, good practices. And that's what prompted me to come back to the United Nations. Interestingly, in 1995, when I was still in the university, Beijing platform happened.
Indeed.
And Hillary Clinton came to China, to Beijing. It was a massive affair. And I was studying sociology and women's study in the US. And I thought, someday I want to work for that organization. So when I graduated, I decided I wanted to come back to Nepal and to see what is my interest and what are the areas I want to pursue for my master's. And that landed me to doing a study on, being part of a team to do a first ever situation analysis on HIV. Through that,
in Nepal.
In Nepal, I was the main social analyst for 1 year. And that got me close to UNAIDS, and somehow my work was appreciated. And I was introduced to UNICEF, and at the age of 23, and my first work in UNICEF started. I was a young people consultant.
Awesome.
And
that's where it all
since
started.
then, 22 years later, I'm still with the United Nations in 3 different agencies as a staff member already.
Fantastic.
UNICEF, UNAIDS, and UN Women for the last 8 years. Yeah.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
And I think, this interagency experience only enriches you and gives you a more diverse perspective to things.
Absolutely. And really teaches the importance of working together as a UN,
Sure.
Bringing comparative advantage and leveraging each other's strength.
True.
Because the issues we work on in SDGs, they're so universal in nature.
Absolutely.
No one agency can really respond
True.
On their own without a comprehensive approach. And I really truly believe in this UN reform, especially the delivering as one. I have really experienced it firsthand, whether it's working with UNICEF and young people and adolescents, or UNAIDS, which is itself a joint program,
Of course.
and with UN Women, which has one of the 3 mandates. It's on UN coordination. And it's wonderful working under your leadership
Thank you.
to push the agenda forward.
Absolutely. So tell us, how did you eventually come to work for the United Nations in China?
Well, I was in Myanmar as the head of office, and then this position opened up. Initially, I think one of the requirement was someone speaking Chinese, and in UN Women, we don't have rotation like other agencies. So when it's time to move, you have to apply and compete and go through the entire process. So initially, when I saw the advertisement, I didn't apply. Then it was re-advertised, I think, 3 times. And I said, oh, maybe this is,
A sign.
China is calling me and maybe I should apply. And I was always interested in China. I came here in 2008, a work-related trip. I've been coming since 2008, almost every year for work or personal. And I fell in love with it. There was, especially Beijing, I find so much similarity with Kathmandu because both of them are ancient cities and many of the architecture are similar. I even find, because Nepal is a very diverse country, we have people who look very Chinese.
Of course.
So there was this connection, and I keep telling my colleagues and friends that in my past life, maybe I was Chinese because there was this sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to come and work. So when I saw this opportunity, and I said, okay, let me just say I'm interested to learn Chinese and maybe give it a shot. And I applied, and that brought me here.
Fantastic.
In 2019.
Well,
Yeah.
great. And of course, I think you're making, as the leader of UN Women, you're already making a huge difference here. Anyway, so tell us, what does your organization do to support the people of China, the country's priorities, and the UN family at large?
Thank you. I mean, you already know what UN Women does. I mean, we have 3 mandates. One is on really supporting countries on the normative agenda, particularly CEDAW, Commission on Status of Women, and a whole range of other international treaty bodies. The other one is the operationalization of it through programming. And the third one is supporting, under your leadership, we support the RC at the country level to strengthen UN coordination for our accountability to gender equality. In terms of our priorities, we are working in 4 different areas. One is obviously supporting government and policy making, in which we work together with many other UN agencies through interagency process, both at national and provincial level. And then we have quite a few number of programs in different provinces and county level around ending violence against women, women's economic empowerment. Women's economic empowerment also involves a partnership with private sector organizations in China. We have a huge network who implement the women empowerment principles, the WEPS principles. More than 400 private sectors have committed and are implementing, and we support that process through technical assistance and capacity development. And finally, supporting the governance and working with the UN system and China as a development partner and bringing gender as part of the partnership efforts within the cooperation framework. So these are largely our programming footprint.
Great. Could you provide some insight on the key beneficiary of your organization in China?
We work with women and girls in their diversity, but of course we also work with men and boys and with young people and with key influential leaders as agents of change to support gender equality and women's empowerment mandate in China. With regards to beneficiary, for example, UN Women is partnering with IFAD for a rural revitalization project in Hunan province, working with local Hunan government. And most of the beneficiaries are rural populations, farmers, including 50% of whom are women. And 30% of the entire target population we're reaching is also ethnic minority. So that's one example. On the private sector, which I already outlined, so we're working with more than 400 companies in China, and they're not just multinational companies from other countries, but also Chinese companies, both working here and overseas, where we support capacity development of standards, and a whole range of other issues.
I think the UN Women is also very much part of the broader interagency mix, such as the H6 partnership groups on maternal health and all that. So I think the role of UN Women is so crucial. I was reading a statistic that the number of women that have actually joined the workforce in China, maybe that also probably was one of the major reasons for the velocity that it got to its own economy.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, in terms of percentages.
I think there was a real push for women in employment and in labor because, the job, when the economic boost started to happen, these were incentives. People were needed, both men and women. And so I think that really pushed women's employment rate in labor, or labor force participation really increased in that time.
So let's go on to the next question then. Identify some of the remaining development challenges faced by China in the coming years and how your organization, as part of the UN in China, will assist China in the achievement of the SDGs.
We are here to support the implementation of the cooperation framework, all of us collectively working together. And that's our roadmap and where we have identified key priorities. When it comes to gender equality and women's empowerment, three things really stand. And I don't know if they are per se challenge or opportunities we have. One is with the rapid transitions that are taking place in China, whether it's green economy and looking at digital economy. This is a massive opportunity to bring women along, both as workers, as thought leaders, as decision makers. I mean, green job itself, UN Women estimates it's going to create more than 24 million green jobs globally. And the key issue, therefore, is going to be to what extent can we invest in empowering women and girls, training them, building capacity, skilling and reskilling, so that they are able to manage the transition and make a shift, and we capitalize on their full potential, real and actual potentials moving forward. If we look at the data, currently women mostly work in the primary and secondary sector. So the challenge is going to be that leapfrogging them from these two sectors to the tertiary sector. And the tertiary sectors are going to be these key sectors that's going to be the economic engine for the country. And I think that's where the focus needs to be. And as a UN, we can really shift by bringing partners together, looking into policy space, influencing policies, and supporting the government in its national planning and prioritization and implementation process. So that's one area. The second area, I believe, is obviously, China has all the right tools and policies and a clear vision and a capacity to govern. But when it comes to gender equality, perhaps the implementation, given the complexity and how big the country is, the implementation is always not even. So how do we make sure that, some provinces who are well-resourced may have higher capacity and really doing a fabulous job on pushing SDG 5, for example, can benefit sharing learning and experiences and exchange and transfer of tools and technology and resources to other provinces and counties where there is that greater need and support. And I think it's an issue that China also is interested to address, looking at, this urban-rural divide and how
which
do
is
we bridge
reflected in
that.
the 14th five-year plan.
Yeah, and how do we bridge that and making sure that, that agenda also meets the needs of women and girls and promotes their rights in a comprehensive way in all spheres. So that would be the second area. The third is, it's interesting because it's rapidly evolving and developing and moving forward. And then because it is an ancient culture, and obviously people's understanding on what women should do or the role of men also plays out differently. And then you also see at the national level, women carry 2.5 times more care work than men do. So engaging men more in cultivating a family value that is equal, fair for both men and women and all family members within a family sphere, but also in the governance sphere, and really promoting women's leadership and capacity evenly throughout the country. And I think that's where a lot of effort need to be placed.
As the wise words once said by a great leader of China, women hold up half the sky. And I think it's manifested itself in many, many walks of life.
Yes, absolutely. Chairman Mao said that. Yeah.
All right, so let's go to the next part of this question. So what is your day like from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed? You're a mother, you're a professional, you have a household to manage, you do so many things.
Yeah, it's a busy day. I'm sure all of us can relate to it. You certainly can. I lead a rather simple life. I am a bit of a private person also. What I've learned over the years is to practice gratitude. So my day always begins with being thankful for the things I have, the privileges I have. And it's a good reminder for what I can do better and more, and I need to do as my contribution, my personal contribution to this world. When I die, I always think, this is how we were brought anyways. I'm sure you were brought like that too. You have to make a name for yourself, and that name is not necessarily, for me at least, being the richest person in the world or the most famous in the world, but at least when I'm lying on my deathbed, I can look back and say, okay, I feel good about it. And I want to try to do that every day, not just when I die and wait for that moment, but just to say, okay, today I've done this good. So practicing gratitude and practicing more compassion, and it's something I've really tried to do consciously, and that begins. I've also learned the importance of exercise over the year. It wasn't always like this. When I was young, I used to exercise, but that was for just purely looking good, nothing else. But as I age, I realized how important it is, because we live, a rather stressful and busy life, and to find that balance. And your body is not the same as you are when you're 20. So exercise is part of my routine. This morning I run or do some kind of exercise every day.
Great.
And you're such an inspiration when it comes to that. So I want to learn how to breathe and stay in cold water for a long time. It's something I'm really going to try. That's my goal for this year.
Trust me, it'll change your life. But the fact that you're practicing gratitude, it's interesting that you mentioned that. There is actually a breathing technique of practicing gratitude where you actually breathe to practice that gratitude. Breathing combined with some exercise and a cold water shower, you're set. You'll start to see how your body's immune system ramps up. Something I'm looking forward to having a conversation with the entire team, and perhaps by the time we get to the next town hall, is to really start looking after ourselves, a lifestyle issue. So I love what you just said, Smriti.
And there are two things. I mean, the other thing is really having a commitment and passion for the work we do.
Absolutely.
That is so important.
True.
It's such a privilege to serve in the UN. I mean, comparing to what's happening around the world, and comparing to people not having enough to eat, not even having enough to wear, you see, people suffering. And I always feel like, okay, I can contribute. There is not a whole lot of time for us to achieve SDG. So complacency is not in my books, and I think my team will relate to this.
Fantastic.
Every day I remind, there is not, we don't have 500 days to do this. We need to do it now, and we need to deliver with impact. And I learned so much from the team, from the people, from the amazing, such bright group of partners and individuals I have met in China. It's really, learning is something that I feel is part of my journey, and I hope that can help me keep up with the change, keep up with the new perspective, and actively, consciously try to be a better version of myself and to do better. I guess these are sort of the core aspects of my everyday life that I consciously make a point to think about.
Awesome. Great. So tell us, what does delivering as one mean to you, Smriti?
Yeah, I think that's really important. We've spoken a little bit about it. I think it's basically the UN system coming together as one in our programming, in our advocacy, in our support to the government and to our national partners, bringing in our comparative advantage, our niche, developing, making linkages and really working together as one in the achievement of SDGs.
Now tell me, what would you think would be an ideal UN resident coordinator?
I think in one of the podcasts, I can't remember which one of the heads of agency mentioned a conductor. And I think that's very well put. It's the role of a conductor.
An orchestra conductor.
Who brings everybody together to have that harmony and synchronization and to produce that sound, right?
Not noise, but sound.
Sound, yes. And so for me, I think there are 6 characteristics. Of course, visionary. The leadership requires a vision, because we work in all countries are complex and there are so many interrelated issues. And so such a diverse mandate we all have. So the vision, clear vision, strategic mindset, being intentional about delivering as one, but being intentional about our efforts. I guess we talk a little bit about that too. A learner, I think it's really important to come with an open mind, because you're working with a large group of very able UNCT members, and to learn from them as much as you give it to them, being a learner. And for me, of course, being a champion of gender equality, so the person can, as a RC, can really walk the talk. That's a precondition, I would say, to all the other characteristics.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure many RCs will listen to this podcast also across the world, so they will all aspire to be in that, and I certainly will try and do my best to fit into all those aspects that you talked about.
You are. Yes. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Smriti. It was great to have you on the show, and for sharing your story with us and sharing your time with us today. If you would like to learn more, visit china.un.org or follow the UN in China on our Twitter. Join us next time for another installment of Delivering as One, a UN in China conversation. Thank you again, Smriti.
Thank you, Sid.